With that, I'd like to welcome Dr. Grossman from Cleveland. He's an internist, and please correct me if I'm wrong here, and specializing with older people. So he has lots and lots of experience around bone health and so many other things that older people come up with. So welcome, Dr. Grossman, and please tell us a little bit about bone health and osteoporosis, and then I'll go ahead and present you some of these questions that we have.
Thank you, Peter. So in terms of bone health, the things that we think of that are pretty basic are the density of the bone. When we speak of it, because we're always concerned about low density, osteopenia, osteoporosis, and the risk of fracture as you get older. And the bone itself, you know, it's primarily made up of calcium and phosphate. We usually get plenty of that in our diet, although there are some circumstances where we don't. There's obviously some need for adequate vitamin D levels to absorb calcium. But what I was focusing on mainly was the effect that the bone has on buffering acid loads in the diet and the excretion of that in the urine. So our body's very sensitive to the pH or the acidity of the bloodstream. We want to maintain that. We have many mechanisms to maintain that, but one of the quicker mechanisms of buffering is using the calcium in the bone to buffer it, and then using the kidneys to either excrete or hold on to the calcium and the acid load. Depending on the type of food that you eat, you may be subjecting yourself to higher acid loads over a long period of time. And although they're very mild acid loads, they do add up over time. And as you get older, they become more of an issue in terms of maintaining the density of your bone. We've known for a long time that our diets have changed over the past maybe 100 years and more rapidly in the past 60 years. And it shifted more from a ratio of higher protein grain to higher animal protein, higher vegetable grain fruit to animal, which it used to be more like a 1-to-1 ratio. And now it's shifted more to more animal versus fruit, vegetables, and grain. And in seeing that, it's correlated with loss of bone density. And we can see that in societies. We can also see that in modernization of primitive cultures that get in contact with our Western diet. And when they change their ratios, they change their acid load, and they have to buffer more acid, and their bones suffer from that. So, you know, that's the basis of it. There's a couple other things that plants help with that animal protein doesn't help, and that is by supplying potassium, magnesium, and these are alkaline type of what we call cations, and they're preferential to decreasing the acid load in the gut and then in the bloodstream. So shifting the diet will make a difference. I'm looking at some of the questions, and I'm sort of thinking the first question comes to mind: at what age do you want to think about bone health? Usually, as we're adults, middle age. We don't think too much about it when we're younger, but as we get older, a couple things come into play. We're less active. We have less stimulation to the bones, and also our kidney function diminishes, especially when we get up in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And the ability of the kidneys to buffer acid is lessened, and so the bones have to buffer it. And so that causes a little more leaching of some of the calcium phosphate.
So the acid is leaching out the calcium and phosphate in our bones.
Yeah, a little bit at a time. It's just buffering it to maintain a very precise pH in the bloodstream. And we need to do that. And we also need to maintain a precise calcium level in the bloodstream.
Right.
And that's what the bones do also.
Excellent. Well, that's wonderful information. I guess the next question is about children. So what's the best way to protect bone health in our children?
So your bones are made up of a matrix, which is really a substance where the calcium phosphate is laid down on. And that matrix is made up of protein. So things that cause problems with children's bones are a little bit different because their bones are growing rapidly, and they have to have adequate protein. My feeling is that a balance, a 1-to-1 ratio or better is adequate, but people that have studied children and problems with their bones, the first thing they mention is adequate protein intake, obviously vitamin D and calcium, but we get enough calcium pretty much in our food sources, and especially because we fortify a lot of our food sources. So I would say you have to make sure that they're getting enough protein and that it's good protein and that it's balanced protein.
Wonderful, thank you. So somebody's asking, what tests are available to know bone quality? What would help to improve bone quality?
So, I mean, the gold standard is the bone density. And it gives you an idea of whether you have osteopenia, which is really decreased calcium deposits in the bone, or osteoporosis, which is really a loss of structure in the bone. So that when you do an X-ray, which is what the bone density is, it actually doesn't block the X-rays out as well, so the bone's thinned out. Probably that's the gold standard. You also want to make sure you have adequate vitamin D levels. There really aren't a lot of other tests, but if you have vitamin D deficiency, then you need to address that, and that's kind of a separate issue. Vitamin D is the gateway for calcium to be absorbed properly, and with low vitamin D, you're not going to absorb it properly, and you're not going to have your other hormones working properly. So, and how often should you get a bone density? Well, I think if it's normal, you can get it infrequently. If it's abnormal, you kind of want to watch it every 2 to 3 years. Medicare pays for it every 2 years. That might be a little bit on a short span, but 2 to 3 years to see if there's any change. What you're looking for is a significant decrease from one test to the next, but you really have to wait a couple years to get that test done. And you really don't need to have it done until you're really in your 50s or 60s. So,
So actually, is there also differentiations in bone quality, or is it all about the quantity?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. I'm not sure. I mean, there are brittle bones. There are bones that have inadequate matrix. That's a separate issue. There's osteomalacia, separate issue. Vitamin deficiencies causing rickets and things like that. But in terms of the run-of-the-mill tests, they just show the density. I'm not sure how to address quality. I think that's more in turn with measuring vitamin levels. The strength of the bone is, and this is what I've learned, is that the bone is about as strong as reinforced steel.
Wow.
And so the calcium, if you think about reinforced steel, you've got steel rods, which is the matrix, and then you've got concrete, which is poured around the around the steel rods, and that's your calcium phosphate, which gives it the stability and the compressibility. So when you don't have that ability to take on compressive forces, then the steel rods can snap, and that's when you break your bones.
Interesting. Well, thank you so much for that. So what are, let's see, some of these other questions here. We have so many. What are the main things to avoid to prevent calcium loss?
So, well, so it depends on who you listen to, but I'll say the first thing is maintaining a balanced diet, not having a highly acidic diet. And things that cause a lot of acid would be animal protein, colas, which have a lot of acidic phosphate. And animal proteins tend to have more sulfuric acid and sulfate. They're harder to buffer. They're more acidic. So those things will definitely, over time, create bone loss. Obviously, smoking has somewhat of an effect. Large amounts of caffeine have that effect too. But mainly it's the acid load of foods, and foods that, like I say, colas, high protein diets tend to do that. Now, I'm not saying that you should have a low protein diet, but you should have an adequate and a balanced protein diet with more vegetables, fruits, and whole grains, because those are less acidic. They bring in the potassium, the magnesium, and they are good buffers, alkaline buffers to the acidity.
So one of our viewers is wondering, can you, off the top of your head, recall any major studies that compare people who eat more plant foods compared to people who eat high animal content, high animal protein content?
So there are variable studies. Many of the studies I've seen, people that eat high animal protein tend to have lower femoral neck density, bone densities. But there are some studies that have shown that pure vegetarians or vegans don't have any advantage over meat eaters. So it's kind of a mixed bag. But if you look at the graphs of countries where we have high dairy food intake, high protein intake, and you can graph these countries out, the incidence of skeletal fractures goes up as the percentage of consumption of animal protein, and especially dairy protein, goes up. It's kind of interesting because obviously dairy has calcium in it, so there is there's a push to say you have to consume more calcium, but actually there's a level at which you don't need to consume anymore. And more calcium may actually be more detrimental than, a decent amount of calcium.
Yeah, well, the dairy industry spends a lot of money as an industry telling us that we need to drink more milk. In fact, they have an amazing, almost $250 million budget just to promote the industry as a whole, and that's beyond what the dairy companies themselves spend advertising. So yes, we have been told that, and lots of information showing that that's just really misguiding. So on a slightly different note, what are the best exercises to protect our bones?
So anything that causes vibration in the bones, in the long bones. Walking, running, which depending on your joints, you may or may not want to do. Hiking, the exercises that don't do as much good, swimming, bicycling helps a bit, but not as much as walking. So anything that causes vibration to the bones stimulates the maintenance of bone strength.
Excellent. Well, thank you. Can you address strength training for women in the perimenopause stage in supporting bone health?
So I don't know if that indirectly helps in terms of muscle strength and actually causing some stimulation to the bones, because you're putting stress on the joints. So I think some of that has to do with putting stress on the joints. It may have an indirect effect on the hormones and improving estrogen levels a little bit. So I don't know the specifics, but I would say it's probably some of both. But I'm not gonna give you an expert's opinion on that. Sorry.
Okay. Well, thank you. A different question is about sugar. How about high sugar diets? Does sugar create acidic blood conditions and inflammation and affecting the bones?
Correct. So sugar creates an acidic environment. It has to be buffered, and the bones do buffer, high sugar content foods. And some people might argue about, well, then what about fruits? Well, fruit has, again, fructose is a little different than glucose, which is in the bloodstream. It has to it has to be broken down. But there definitely is some increased acid load in fruits, but it is actually compensated by the fact that fruits have a lot of potassium in it. And there's been many studies that have correlated high potassium intake with bone strength. And I think that probably has to do with the buffering effect, so that if you're taking in fructose in the form of fruits, you have some protection there. If you're taking in sugary drinks or just, cakes and pies and stuff like that, you probably don't have some of the advantages of having potassium in that mix and actually mitigating some of the acidic properties of the sugar. So it's better than the sweets that we have produced, we have manufactured.
Mm-hmm. Well, excellent. Somebody's asking if green kale smoothies are okay.
I suppose so. If it's kale, I don't know. I haven't had one of those, but kale is fine. Kale has a lot of magnesium and potassium in it, and it has protein, and it has calcium. So calcium, potassium, magnesium, all good.
Uh-huh. And does fiber play into this at all?
Well, I mean, fiber plays into a lot of things. Fiber helps your gut. It helps the absorption of nutrients. Does it help the bones? I'm not sure directly how it helps the bones, but I mean, if you're eating a high fiber diet, you obviously are also eating plants, because animals don't have fiber. They don't have cell walls. So if you're eating a high fiber diet, you obviously are ingesting magnesium, potassium in good levels too.
Excellent. Will tea and coffee have an impact on the wrist?
Well, I mean, a little bit. Caffeine causes you to It's a little bit of a acid load, and it does cause the kidneys to work a little harder. But again, I mean, a modest amount probably is not going to harm you. Herbal teas are probably better, but decaffeinated, I don't know. I guess that's probably a little better. But if it's your drink of choice and you're having 6 or 8 cups a day, or you always have a, I see people with their coffee, Mr. Coffee, so they drink the whole thing, and it's probably not good. It's probably leaching some calcium out of your bones.
Excellent. I'm wondering. So I've heard before that that sodas are not good. I'm wondering, like sparkling water, club soda, things like that. Would that fall in with like Pepsi and colas and
the carbonation issue? You mean?
Yeah, is the carbonation an issue?
I used to think so, but there's been some studies that have sort of debunked that. So maybe to a very minor degree, the carbonation is it's carbon dioxide dissolved in water. So I suppose there might be a little bit of acidity in there, but I don't think it now is considered a major issue. It's more the phosphate in the colas. It's phosphoric acid, and it's the old putting the nail in the Coke bottle and watching it dissolve. So
yeah,
you watch your bones
that's
dissolve.
pretty amazing that happens.
No. And on a slower scale, over years, it's doing the same thing to your bones. So, there's some questions about. In your video, you mentioned sodium bicarbonate also helps buffer. Yes, so sodium bicarbonate is a buffer in the small intestines. And so, yes, that does buffer the ingested foods, and that's also excreted out in the kidneys. But again, that's not what we call an exogenous load of acid or alkaline. What you're eating is what I was concerned with, which is what is it that you bring to your gut, and what does the gut have to do to make that digestible, absorbable, and then not wreak havoc in the bloodstream. So the sodium bicarbonate, you got acid in your stomach. You have to have acid. You have very strong acid. That has to break down the protein, because it takes a stronger acid to break down a weaker acid. So the amino acids are weaker acids, so you use hydrochloric acid. But when it gets into the small intestine, a very acid load is going to tear up your intestines. So you have to have that sodium bicarbonate to neutralize it, and then it can be absorbed without harming your system. So, we manufacture acid, we manufacture bicarbonate, we manufacture acids and bases. But again, this is a self-contained system. But if you continually put in acid in the system, then you're asking the system to do work of one kind, which is buffering that acid. And that's what I was referring to. Apple cider vinegar. I heard it is. I don't know how it is, but I suppose it has a lot of potassium and magnesium and things like that. I don't know the answer to that question. It's probably a good thing to look up. So I'll have to look up the ingredients. It is a weak acid, but again, having a weak acid does not always mean that it creates acidity in your bloodstream. So, because there are fruits that are weakly acidic that don't cause acidity in the bloodstream.
So then, do we want to do things to alkalize our bloodstream then? And I guess being on a plant-based diet definitely does that.
Yeah, you are alkalizing. Yeah. Do you want to take in bicarbonate of soda? No. I mean, people used to do that, and there are some side effects of that too. So no, I mean, use your diet to make sure you're not over acidifying your bloodstream.
Right. And that's probably where our number one principle of whole foods, in that use your diet, use the whole foods, use the fresh foods to
Right.
get the nutrition and all the other parts that our body needs to be strong and healthy.
So
Well,
your bones will recover. I was looking at another question. Your bones will recover over time. So if you don't continually abuse them, they will recover.
do you have any examples you could share with us with your patients where somebody's recovered and
Well,
some miraculous outcomes?
so I don't have any miraculous outcomes. I can tell you that people heal faster. Older people heal faster that have balanced diets, because that just helps the deposition, the proper deposition of the matrix and the calcium phosphate. But no, I don't. I wish I did. I don't know whether I don't know. I'm sure they're out there. I just don't have them.
Okay, thank you. Does this next question, does intermittent fasting positively impact bone health?
I don't know. That's a good question. It might. I don't know. That would. I would think it might. It might help the body's pH. It also, since it's not using a lot of energy in the gut, because we expend a lot of energy in the gut, that energy and that work of the body may be redirected to the bones and the rest of the organs. So there's probably some of that in terms of, redirecting utilization, repairing, things like that. So yeah, I would think.
Wonderful. Yeah, well, and I've got to think, and what do I know? I'm not a doctor by any means, but if somebody's eating a really lousy diet and they fast, then they're at least giving their body a chance to rest for a moment there. Does that make any sense? Is that
right?
Yeah.
Definitely.
Excellent. Would you like to tell us a little bit about your practice? If somebody has any other questions, would you like them sent to you direct or through us, or how can we reach you if somebody'd like to reach you? You
can give them my email, or you can send them through you. My practice is basically adult medicine. Again, a lot of them are over the age of 60. I work in a urban area. I work for a county system now. So, we have a lot of people that are challenged in terms of their resources, some of which is dietary resources and things like that. And, we're trying to address food deserts and things like that. So I see a lot of people that probably could eat much better diets. When I talk to them, we try and, especially those people that are on fixed incomes, we try and work with them. So that's basically what I've been doing for the past 30-odd years. Hope to continue for a while. Well, that's wonderful. That's doing the wonderful work you're doing as a doctor, and then on top of it, doing it with the underserved people. And I know how extra challenging that is, and I really salute you and honor you for the work you're doing and for all the people you've helped throughout your career and continue to help. So thank you for all of us for doing your wonderful work. Well, thank you, Peter, for putting this together. I think that educating people with the basics, they can really do most of the work themselves. And, a lot of it is pretty self-evident. We've gotten away from healthy things. Food has always been a communal type of situation where families ate together, prepare foods. We've gotten away from that. And I think that's also part of it, is in terms of our health. So it's the food you eat and how you eat it and who you eat it with and your attitude. So improve your attitude.
Yeah, that's a challenge for some of us.
Well, you can smile when you eat. How's that?
There you go. Yeah, and perhaps bless the food before we eat.
Bless the food, right?
And appreciate it. That's
and look at the people and talk to the people that you're with. Hopefully.
Yeah. That's certainly, we've gotten away from a lot in a lot of ways, haven't we?
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, it's been an honor, and I hope somewhat helpful to people. And send me questions if you can. I'll try and answer them, or I'll direct you, or I'll look up. If I don't know, I'll look up what I need to know and get back to you. I promise you that.
That'll be wonderful, and we appreciate having you part of this conversation and part of our growing community here with Hippocrates Docs. And I think what has been coming forward for me is asking the question of, what would Hippocrates want us to do? What would the father of Western medicine, who we quote as "let food be thy medicine," what would he want us to be doing? So thank you. We really appreciate your time and your input, and thank you for putting together the wonderful video for our email, and I look forward to having you part of our community and participating in other ways too. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Have a great evening, and thank you so much, everybody, and thank you for joining us. And please send us your comments and your thoughts, and we really would like to hear your success stories and how you're doing with the challenges. This effort here is absolutely a community-based effort and a collaborative and cooperative effort, and we look forward to all your input, everybody, and that's how we're going to grow this and move forward, is with everybody's input. So thank you, everybody. All the best in health, and look forward to seeing you next week. And again, thank you. And our topic next week is about nuts and seeds, and Dr. Chellam is our featured doctor for next week. So look forward to Saturday's email from Dr. Chellam with her video, and Tuesday night we'll see you with her answering the questions. So she'll challenge us on Saturday, and let's come back Tuesday night and challenge her with our best questions. So thank you so very much, everybody. Have a good night.